This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio.
The Filipino American Cancer Care now brings you On the Air with FACC, tributes and support to those impacted by cancer. On the Air with FACC, the Filipino American Cancer Care on PHLV Radio.
Magandang America, welcome sa PHLV Radio Las Vegas. My name is Josie Moralidad Zaiman at wini-welcome po namin kayo sa ating programang On the Air with FACC. Tonight, it's September 24, 2021. Still, we are celebrating the Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And syempre, ngayong gabi kasama natin sa Las Vegas ang ating station manager na si Mr. Johan. Napakabait. Yeah, isang palakpak. And hindi natin makakasama ngayong gabi si Emerich dahil busy siya sa kanyang trabaho. But anyway, Emerich, we'll see you next week. And syempre, kasama ko naman ang ating co-founder sa Filipino American Cancer Care, Mr. Ed Logan. Hi, Ed!
Hey, Josie. Again, it's Friday. I can't believe we almost finished the September and there's another big event coming up. Okay, Josie, I know our guest tonight also going to be participating in our big event next month, but I'm not going to spoil it. But thank you again for all our listeners who are constantly giving us the encouragement to continue this advocacy. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat sa Pilipinas and good evening here in the Philippines. So Josie, why don't you introduce our special guest tonight?
Yes, but before we introduce our special guest, we have a special event this coming Sunday para po sa ating mga followers, mga supporters, donors, and volunteers dito sa DMV area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. We would like to invite you sa ating celebration ng Childhood Cancer Awareness Month ngayong Sunday, September 26, 2021. We are going to have Brewing for a Cause, Funding Cure for Childhood Cancer. And Ed, what are we going to have on Sunday?
Oh, yes. And now first, I want to thank Rachel Dakanay Smith, who is our chair for this particular event. And then, of course, we have a family who's going to sing with us. Hadzik family, Enzo, one of our young ambassador for the next gen for FACC, and of course John, who serenaded our Miss Universe Philippines, Rabea Mateo, and we're gonna have ice cream, Kona ice cream, and we're gonna make arts and crafts, these cards. That's going to be made by our guests, our kids, who's going to be making some encouragement words and send it to the cancer kids in the Philippines and here in the U.S. So there'll be a fun family event, Josie.
Mm-hmm. In other words, we are going to have fun, live music and entertainment, arts and crafts, food and ice cream track, and it is a fun-filled family event. And by the way, in the spirit of the upcoming holidays, please bring this Sunday, September 26, a brand new toy and or a book if you would like to help our toy book drive. We will be sending a balikbayan box or a cargo box in the Philippines, and it should get right before Christmas. So this is a good way of, showing our love and sharing what we have here in the United States for the cancer kids in the Philippines.
Yes, so excited.
Okay.
Josie, introduce.
Yes. Now, I would like to introduce our special guest tonight. She is going to be one of the models for the FACC Couture Carriage for a Cure. She is a 21-year-old student studying at Columbia University, bone cancer survivor, and founder of Youth Against Cancer, a youth-run nonprofit organization driven to advocate for better cancer relief efforts, care, delivery, and access for all in Zimbabwe. Youth Against Cancer collaborates with like-minded individuals and organizations and runs numerous cancer awareness campaigns and fundraisers to achieve this mission. Some of the organization's successful efforts include coordinating a fundraiser which raised $800 to support children living with cancer and funding cervical cancer screenings for 50 underprivileged rural women. Presently, Youth Against Cancer builds a survivors network for patients and survivors to connect and inspire each other through storytelling. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of the Youth Against Cancer and Bone Cancer Survivor, Wadzi Mayiseni. Hi, Wadzi. Good evening here in the United States. Good morning in the Philippines. And good morning in Zimbabwe.
Hi, Josie. Hi, Logan. Thank you guys so much for having me. Super excited for this conversation. And thank you even for the introduction. I was listening and thinking, is this me? You made it sound so, I don't know. But
and now you're a founder. You're a founder and a CEO of a nonprofit organization.
I'll take it.
Okay, Ed, you have the floor.
Yes, Wadzi, because at that time when Mithy Aquino and Harry told me about your story, I don't want to spill that, that sparkling story. So I want to make sure I ask the first question, just to get to, our listener get to know you. How many siblings do you have? And, just tell about the background of your family in Zimbabwe.
Tell us about your life in Zimbabwe.
Nice. Well, thank you. I come from a family of 3. I have 2 older brothers, way older than me. The one I come after is 9 years older. And I come from a single parent household. So I was raised by my mom, and basically, I can say my grandparents as well. So I grew up under my grandparents' house. And in terms of my life in Zimbabwe, I always tell people that it's very different. It was very different to the life here. I think generally in Zimbabwe, there's a strong sense of community. So even outside of your family, you consider the person who stays next door, the person who stays right across from your house, to be more than a neighbor. They're if it's a friend, they become sisters or brothers. If it's their parents, they become your parents as well.
Oh, you have an extended family.
Pretty much. Pretty much. So I would say, to just encapsulate my experience living in Zimbabwe, there's a rich and strong sense of community that I'm slowly finding here, but it looks very different and it feels very different. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't want also to jump into the stuff that I think will be asked on later.
What is the minimum wage, of a worker in Zimbabwe? As I understand, it's one of the countries that, they need more help from other countries.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Josie. And I feel like, to be honest with you, there's no documented, at least to my knowledge, the rate of unemployment is so high that, to be honest, I don't think there's a documented minimum wage that I know about. What I do know is that people, more than, I'd say 70% of people are out of jobs, especially in the area that I'm from in Zimbabwe. People do odd jobs to make ends meet. So we're looking at people selling snacks by the road just to feed their families. And if I'm to gauge how much they make a day, I'd say maybe nothing more than $50, which I think I'm actually overestimating. It should be maybe way less than $20. We're looking at snacks that cost around maybe 10 cents, 50 cents, and you're selling to local people. So I'd say for the most part, especially given the COVID pandemic, most people losing their jobs, most people not being able to go to work, we're looking at people living hand to mouth. And for the most part, like I said, in the area that I'm from, most people do a couple of odd jobs, if available, to feed their families. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
You know, as I am reading some facts about Zimbabwe, like some of the information I found out right now, your country or Zimbabwe is actually rich in natural resources.
It is.
You have the world's largest waterfall, the Victoria Falls, okay? And you have, or the Zimbabwe, they have the world's biggest man-made lake and King Solomon gold mines. But still, I heard from Ed and Miti and Ambassador Thomas that there is only one cancer center in the whole nation.
Yes.
That's very sad.
It is. Especially, I remember, looking back to 2012 when I was getting my treatment, I had to have, so even when I was still in hospital, we had people from Bulawayo, which is, on the outskirts of the country, people living, in different regions, all coming to the capital city just to access treatment. And now when you think about things like bus fare, things like infection, when, they have to travel with kids that are undergoing chemotherapy to and from their houses, those are like very complicating factors to think about. But at the end of the day, like you said, it is the reality, sad reality that our cancer is very specific. But I would say generally our healthcare system is not that great. And that's the sad reality about Zimbabwe.
Why do you think so?
Well, I don't want to get too political.
Question. I'm gonna switch a little bit about the question. So, Wadzi, I know, the kids, the youth is really dear to your heart, right? So, what pursues you to go and study here in America, and then what experience when you experience the cold stuff in New York? Okay, so give us a little bit of your experience on that.
How were you able to get here, and who helped you immigrate here in the United States?
I hear you. And I think just to circle back on your question, I think at the end of the day, I believe in my country's potential. There's a lot of potential. There's room for improvement. It's a matter of governance. It's a matter of cooperation and fitting into why I decided to come to America. I think the sad reality, like I've said, and it not only applies to the healthcare system, it also applies to the education system. Not only was my family able to afford education in Zimbabwe, higher education, tertiary education, we're also looking at opportunities that education would grant me after school. So basically comparing the education I'd get maybe at UZ, which is University of Zimbabwe, compared to Columbia, we decided, it's best for me to get education here. I'm majoring in neuroscience. I'm planning on going into neurosurgery and doing a lot of cancer research. But basically exposing myself to the different opportunities that being at Columbia, being in America, allows me to, and then taking that experience with me and seeing how I can contribute to the improvement of the healthcare system and living conditions back in my country. So I think the simple answer to your question is a matter of resources, a matter of opportunities that I'll be exposed to in both environments, and just weighing that on a scale and saying that coming here I would be way better off with the education that I get here. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And in
You know,
terms of
yes,
transition
go ahead, Ed.
to America. So how is it in terms of the weather, the
Yeah.
food, you know?
Oh
you
my
experience-
God.
Wadzi, did you experience any culture shock?
I feel like that's a very hard question in the sense that usually, so I heard about culture shock before coming here. And literally in my mind, because the word shock, scientifically, I was thinking of, I'm going to be standing in the middle of a road and then something happens and then I'm going to be taken aback and, gasping and thinking, oh my God, what just happened? But that did not happen, thankfully. In terms of different cultural things that I had to adjust to, there are many. So like Logan said, there's the food component, which I think so many people underestimate, but to me it was really important. So from the very first time I came here, I noticed the chicken tastes different.
Mm.
The chicken tastes different, because I was thinking, even when you just boil it and put salt, it would taste way different to the chicken back home under the same recipe. So if I boil chicken and put chicken from Zimbabwe and put salt, I feel like it would taste way better than the one here. So that was definitely an area that I had to adjust to. And even with missing home food, missing my mom's cooking, it's one of those things I always laugh with my uncle, because every Sunday, my mom and I would go to church, and we knew that we were going to go back home to a fully cooked meal, a fully set table. There's, country sausages, there's bread, maybe he's made French toast, he's made some stew with baked beans. And then there's just that sense of coming back to that sense of community, that sense of family, bonding. And so when I came here, there wasn't that. I was still trying to make friends, let alone talk about making a meal with people that barely know you. So that was definitely an area I needed to adjust to. And then in terms of the weather, oh my God, don't get me started. I remember stepping in. So I flew into JFK.
What month did you arrive here?
So this was July 2019. Early
Okay,
July
so that's summer.
2019. Yeah. So now I arrive, I walk out of the airport. I'm so excited. I'm finally in America. I walk out and I'm greeted by this really ugly heat. I'll call it ugly because that was my very first experience of it. I was like, why is it so humid? Back home it gets really hot, but it never gets humid. So even like on the hottest days, you can stand underneath a shade and you'll be fine.
Yes.
And then you're walking and the heat is like literally everywhere. That was the first thing I noticed. I was like, how do people survive in this heat? Like, how do people actually go out, do things, and actually say they're enjoying summer when it's this hot? So that was definitely something I was not expecting. And when it actually, surprisingly, I feel like I'm actually better off with the cold. But now I feel like it's because New York is not as cold as other states like Massachusetts. But I feel like I'm actually happier in winter in terms of how I feel about the weather.
Now you're starting to like the 4 seasons, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, but even from the beginning, I feel like for me, if I were to choose from the time that I came here, like my very first year, I would definitely go with the winter. Because I think, simply put, with winter, no matter how cold it gets, you can always put on something, and, you get warm and stuff like that. But with the heat,
That's the thing.
there's only so much you can take off. There's only so much you can take
And you
off.
know what, Z, for Filipinos like us, we also love winter now.
Oh, really?
Yes. Now I can't stand heat.
Wait, how is
Especially
the
when you're
weather like
getting
in the
older.
Philippines?
What's that?
How's the weather like in the Philippines?
Oh, it's very hot. and
Okay.
humid.
Does it get humid
Uh-huh.
though?
Yeah, but I've never been back there for 20 years. Ed, when was the last
That's
time
a
you were
long
in
time.
Philippines?
25 years ago.
Oh, 5 years
Wow.
ago.
Yeah, no,
So,
but Josie,
yeah.
does it get humid though? Or it's just
Yes.
like dry heat?
Yeah. No, it's humid.
Very hot.
There's some
Ah.
areas like the mountainside in
Mhm.
Baguio, and then there's in Taal. So those are the summer
Mhm.
capital that people visit.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
No, Ed, we are still in the process of getting to know Wadzi and Zimbabwe. Wadzi, the size of Philippines is just like the size of California. Our
Wow.
population is like 100 million.
Wow.
What is the size of Zimbabwe and what is the population?
Wow. I feel like this is now like a general knowledge.
Well, for the
Now we're
benefits
joking
of our,
journalists.
for the benefits of our
Yeah.
followers and
We're trying to
listeners,
educate
they don't
them.
want to use the Google right now.
Yes.
Okay,
no.
I was actually going to say, let me Google it because I'm not sure. To be honest with you, I will be lying if I put the numbers to it,
Estimate.
but I would say it's definitely way smaller than the US, and you can definitely look up the exact numbers on Google. But I would say, so one thing I also have to mention is all my life I stayed in Harare, which is the capital city of Zimbabwe. So, well, because of our economic struggles and, people from marginalized areas were coming into the city in search of better living conditions and also opportunities, for livelihood. So, in terms of numbers, I would be lying, but it's definitely way, way smaller than the US. I would, comparing New York to Harare, I would say, well, New York is definitely bigger. You know what? Let's use Google. I don't want to I don't want to mislead you guys. I would say, like on a busy day in Harare, you wouldn't run into as many people as you would on a casual day pre-COVID in New York City, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It's not as
packed. It's not as packed. There is a good number of people, also considering the space that we all have to share. So maybe like if we had a bigger space, we wouldn't feel it wouldn't feel as compact as other areas that are bigger. But me living there and having to interact with the space and the people, I'd say it's definitely small and
So talking about Mr. Google said that in 2020, the population of Zimbabwe is estimated at 14 million.
Wow.
62,924. Wow.
Almost to be.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm receiving this as I'm experiencing the information with you guys. I'm like, okay, 40 million, that's a lot.
I'm just reading. reading.
Yeah.
But anyway, a follow-up question, Ed and Wadzi. Do you have any relatives here in the United States?
No, I do not. I have friends, family friends, in Texas and in Dallas. Well, Dallas is in Texas, but we have family friends, but not anyone who's within the family, who's from the family. Yeah.
So that must not be easy for you to build a life being alone in a country like America.
Yeah, that's actually one of so looking back to my very first year in college, I was having a lot of difficulty coming back to that sense of community I spoke about at the beginning. I was, in my mind, I was thinking, I'm still going to find that in America. And then I come here, I don't know anyone. I don't have any family. I do have a lot of friends, Niti, Ambassador Thomas, like I've said, family, friends, but it's still not the same, For example, with Miti and her family, they were all the way in DC when I came. So it wasn't a case of whenever I miss home, I can just catch a bus ride to their house. So I remember at some point feeling very lonely and isolated, that for me to actually feel alive and connected to something or someone, I had to call my mom. I had to call back home. So the short answer to the question is yes. It was very isolating at first. You're trying to make friends. You're trying to understand who really sees me for who I am. You know, I have this culture. I have all these things that I find value in. And in as much as I'm here to experience different cultures, experience different people, I still want to have that sense of home. And, you know, because there wasn't anyone I knew was close enough to me, it was very isolating, to say the least. But I think over time, the beauty about growth and being in an environment, you know, for some time is that you learn, you know, I may not be able to have that same feeling that I have on Sunday mornings back home, but maybe that feeling, you know, even if it's different, I will find it with friends. Well, you know, right now I have friends from Ghana, friends from Kenya, from Zambia, and we
friends
may not
from the Philippines.
friends from the Philippines, you know. So at the end of the day, we may not necessarily even speak the same language, but we value one another, we see one another, and we're able to build that community. So that's what I've learned over the years. It's been a difficult process, but I've just learned to cherish so much about my family, cherish so much about the friends I've made here who keep me going, who keep me grounded as I go. So, yeah.
Ed?
So Joseph, before we go to the part 2 of our show, I think it's okay to tell who will be serenading Wadzi before we start our second segment. So.
Yes. And I have a follow-up question regarding Mithi. Before I introduce our special guest singing artist tonight, where did you meet, Mithi and Ambassador Thomas?
Yeah, so we go way back with Ambassador Harry. As you're reading my bio, you mentioned that even before starting Youth Against Cancer, I really valued devoting my time and investing my time into cancer relief efforts. So there's an amazing organization called Kids Can in Zimbabwe, and they primarily work at supporting children living with cancer in the country. So I was part of them when I was undergoing cancer, and even afterwards, they were still supporting me. They were inviting me to their different events to speak, talk about my cancer story, and interact with different individuals. So I remember in 2016, it should have been late September, I was speaking at this Kids Can event called Lighted Up Gold. And it's basically an annual event they hold to commemorate people who've, died of cancer and those who've survived, So I was speaking at that, and Ambassador Harry was still the ambassador to Zimbabwe. So I was speaking at the event, I spoke, he also spoke, and then afterwards we had a little chit chat about how the event went. And funny enough, Logan, if you go on his Facebook and scroll all the way back to 2016, you see a picture of me in my school uniform after giving the talk, and he was about to drive off, and we were just talking. So that was my very first contact with Ambassador Harry. And we occasionally spoke over Messenger. He was just checking up on me. I remember when I got my first examination results, like national examination results, I told him, Ambassador Harry, I got 10 A's. And he said, well done. And then when I got into Columbia, I told him I got into Columbia and said, you know what? You are one amazing young lady, and we can't wait to have you here. So when I came here, I remember even I needed winter clothing, different climate here and the one in Zimbabwe. So Ambassador Harry said, you know what? My family and I are going to buy you winter clothing. Just tell us what you need and your sizes. So they did that. And then once I came here, he came to visit with Mitty and Zoe. So that was my very first time meeting Mitty and Zoe. And then from then on, they've just been lovely people as always, as you know them to be. And yeah, that's our story.
And you have a second family in the United States. Okay. Now we have a special song for you, and it's going to our special guest singing artist tonight is a singer from North Carolina and the Philippines. And she was born in one of the cities also in the Philippines, Dumaguete City. She is happily married and has a 9-year-old daughter. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in elementary education in the Philippines, and she currently works at school nutrition program in North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Evelyn Borges.
I'm gonna do a song before I go to work. I hope you like this song. You should know everywhere I go, you're always on my mind, in my heart and in my soul. You know our love was meant to be the kind of love that lasts forever. And I want you here with me from tonight until the end of time. You should know everywhere I go, you're always on my mind, in my heart, in my soul. Baby, you're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life. You're the inspiration. I wanna have you near me. I wanna have you hear me say, no one needs you more than I need you. And I know, yes I know that it's plain to see, we're so in love when we're together. Now I know that I need you here with me from tonight until the end of time. You should know everywhere I go, you're always on my mind, in my heart, in my soul. Baby, you're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life. You're the inspiration. I wanna have you near me. I wanna have you hear me say, no one needs you more than I need you. No one needs you more than I need you. You're the inspiration. I hope you like that song. And good morning.
Thank you so much, Evelyn Borges. You are an inspiration, Wadzi, to all the youth today. How does it feel? Being an inspiration for everybody.
Well, first off, that was so beautiful, so heartwarming. Wow. I really love the song. Her voice is so beautiful. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Mhm.
And about being an inspiration, I don't know. I think it's it's hard to say, because I feel like sometimes even when you impact people's lives, you may not see it. You may not feel it in the moment. But you just continue doing what you believe in doing, and you continue hoping that maybe one person or two people out there are encouraged to keep going. So that's what I'll say.
Okay,
Well,
and
I want to transition to your cancer journey, if you don't mind. So, for our listener, can you walk us through what year and what type of the cancer that during the interview? How did you heard this big horrible news? If you don't
Mm.
sharing that to our listeners.
Yeah, no, I totally do not mind. This is how people get inspired, and these conversations are really important. So again, thank you so much for having me on your platform. Yeah, so I was diagnosed formally or officially diagnosed with osteosarcoma, which is a type of bone cancer in my left leg above knee, in 2012. But I started feeling pain after I fell during a physical education activity at school in 2011. So we were just running, and then I thought, actually, yeah, I just felt weak, and then I fell. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I fell and hit on a rock. So my left leg made impact with a rock that was on the ground, and there was intense pain coming from that. So I even struggled to stand to my feet. And I remember my mom had to be called. I was taken home. And at this point in time, I was a very active athlete. So injuries were the order of the day. They were the order of the week. Almost every single week, I was coming home with an injury of some sort, either from school or from running from school. Would have like racing competitions on our way from school. So even when my mom was called, I'm pretty sure she was just thinking, well, we've dealt with this before. Surely it will pass. So I went home, and after a couple of weeks, nothing was improving. So already, like I said, I was an athlete and injuries were the order of the day. We already had heat rub and a couple of bandages. So after, from the day that I fell to about 3 weeks afterwards, we were just applying heat rub whenever I felt the pain, and then would just, use bandages to rip it up. 3 weeks went by, nothing was improving. And then my mom said, you know what, this is unusual. So maybe we need to go to a doctor and hear what's going on. So initially we went to Red Cross, which was what we could afford at the time.
mhm.
And basically at Red Cross, they requested for x-rays. So we went back, we got x-rays, and the doctor who saw me said, well, we're seeing that she had a fracture when she fell. But fortunately, that fracture is healing. So it's closing. Just continue giving her painkillers when she feels the pain, continue with the bandaging and the heat rub, she'll be fine. So we did that. We went home, continued what we had been told and what we'd been doing. And then I think a month, after that, a month passed by, it was getting worse. So now my leg was swelling, veins were starting to show. It was very shiny for some reason. And we said, you know what, we need to go back to the doctors. So by this time, since we'd been to Red Cross and, we hadn't gotten satisfactory medical advice, we said, okay, let's go to a different one and hear what they have to say. So we went to Harare Hospital, and they requested new x-rays. We got them. And that was the first time I was consulted by a junior doctor. I was seen by a junior doctor who said, well, from what I'm seeing, there's indication of cancer. But because I'm a junior doctor, I'm going to refer you to my seniors who can give you a more conclusive
diagnosis.
Diagnosis, and maybe recommend some tests that they have to do. So that's when it started. I would say it was still in 2011. I was 11 years old. I'm hearing the word cancer. I wouldn't say for the very first time, because by then there was this thing in primary school where we had people write on their hands with ink from pens, and we used to just say, don't do that, you will have cancer. Did we know what cancer meant? No, it was just a word that we threw around to scare each other and stop each other from doing what our parents discouraged. And that's what we used to be told. If you write, on your skin with ink, you will have cancer. But we didn't know what that meant. So now I'm coming from this junior doctor who's said there's potential, there's a possibility that she has cancer. And I'm walking home. My mom is quiet. She's not saying anything. And I'm trying to put pieces together that, the cancer that we talk about in primary school, in school, and we don't even understand what it is what's potentially causing me this pain that I'm feeling. It must be really bad, because every single day I had to take painkillers. And I feel like at this point, if I remember correctly, at this point, even the painkillers were working for a very limited amount of time.
Yeah.
So in my 11-year-old brain, I didn't know what cancer was, but I knew that it was something that was terrible.
But did you get scared?
Yeah, from the pain that I was feeling. I wouldn't say I was scared at this point in time. I was curious. I was curious as to what that meant, what it implied. At this point, there was no mention of amputation. There was no mention of chemotherapy. And even if, they mentioned those two things, I still wouldn't have understood. Yeah. So me not being scared was not necessarily because I was so brave. It was mostly because I didn't understand what was going on. My mother, who did understand what was going on, was in shock. And that shock just prompted her into silence. She wasn't saying anything. She just held my hand and we were walking home. So the junior doctor had said we need to see the senior doctors. So I think the following day we went back, we saw the senior doctors, and that's when they're like, this is definitely cancer. We'll still need to do a biopsy to have like an official diagnosis, but this is definitely cancer. And one thing we didn't like, quite frankly speaking, about our interaction with those senior doctors was everything was so rushed, which is why I think when you're dealing with things like cancer, there's a psychological aspect that I would think doctors understand and need to factor in.
Yeah.
At this point in time, we're still trying to digest, at least for my mother and my family, they're still trying to digest what's going on. And already they were talking about, we need to admit her into hospital. We need to amputate her leg. And when we amputate, she has to have chemotherapy. All those things were true. All those things were necessary. But it was coming at us way too fast than we could take.
What was in your mind when you hear that word that they're going to amputate your legs?
So it's interesting because one key thing about my whole experience is how information was passed down primarily from my family. So I didn't know what amputation meant. And even when we walked away from the senior doctors at Harare Hospital, my mother was just angry at how things were going, but I didn't really know what exactly had they said that angered her so much. So I only understood that amputation is the removal of a limb, I think a month later, when my mom then sat me down and explained these different terms that were being thrown around in my presence, with no one really thinking about breaking it down and explaining to me. But to answer your question, when I then finally learned what cancer is, what amputation meant, I would say I was in a state of disbelief. I think similar to the rest of my family, everything just seemed so casual leading to that point. I used to fall every single week. I used to have injuries every other week. And now this one specific injury is leading me to potentially having an amputation. So in my mind, I think it was like a defensive response, maybe of some sort. The first thing I thought about was, well, they don't know what they're talking about. I've been having these injuries. Why is this one special? So I would say the very first thing I experienced was disbelief. And I think also what also fed that was the fact that my family was also in disbelief. So moving away from the senior doctors that we met, we consulted a lot of traditional healers in the area. You know, we were recommended a lot of herbal medicine, a lot of traditional medicine that apparently worked on some people who had been diagnosed with cancer. So we're looking at a time frame of so this was happening in September. And from September to January 2012, we were moving around looking for who's the famous traditional healer in this area? Who's the famous herbalist in this area who apparently knows how to deal with this? So that disbelief of what the doctors were saying kind of led us to explore other options. And well, it wasn't working. So the pain was, getting worse. The swelling was even way worse. I remember my thigh was, to put it, I guess, maybe into perspective. I was 11 then, and my thigh was, if we were to take a string and measure it round, I think it would be about maybe 50, 60 centimeters if we were to stretch the same thread that if we used it to measure the leg. So it was very big and it was very heavy. Painkillers at this point were not working. I still had them, but they would work only maybe sometimes for 2 hours, and then the pain picks up again. It was disturbing my sleep. By this time, I'd stopped going to school. And that's when, so now it's January 2012. Oh, this is happening. And my mom says, you know what? Let's just go back to the hospital. So now we went to a different hospital called Parinyato Hospital in Harare. And lucky enough, we met really nice doctors. They sat us down, explained everything, and, told us what, in terms of time frame, what we're dealing with. That, well, the more we delay, the more we give you time to think about it, this is what's on the line. We're looking at cancer that's fast spreading. By this time, it was 10 centimeters below my pelvis. And if we delayed any longer, it was going to get into my stomach, which would make it very hard to treat. So, it was still a hard thing to stomach. But at this point, it was very clear that we had to listen to the doctors. We had to cooperate. Mm-hmm. So I was admitted into the hospital in February 2012. They started with the biopsy. And then after a biopsy, they had to book me. I think it was 2 days after the biopsy results came back and confirmed that I had osteosarcoma, that I was booked for an amputation, above knee amputation of my left leg. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I would say.
So how many years were you in treatment and, you were able to recover?
So lucky enough, I always thank God, because after the amputation, I had to start my chemotherapy, and I was given 3 cycles of chemotherapy, and I would say it took about 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. So it would take 2 weeks in hospital, 2 weeks off. That's a month. And then for each cycle. So
Wow.
from March till June, around June-ish, I was going to hospital getting chemotherapy and then go back home and then, repeat.
Okay.
But
And we have 7
thankfully-
minutes.
Yep. Okay. So, Wadzi, I just want to make sure you give the opportunity to our listeners.
Yes.
What would you tell to some of the parents who have their kids have cancer? What kind of advice or message when they're starting their cancer journey at this moment?
Yes.
If you don't mind.
That's a good question. And I always, I think in terms of my message to parents, my mother would be the best person to speak to them. I can speak to the kids because I know
from your perspective. Yes.
Yeah, no, definitely with the parents. I think one thing that I learned that was really key in my recovery and my journey was the support. So there's only so much that parents, especially parents who are not doctors, can do. But I think just being there, holding your child's hand, reaffirming them. I cannot count the number of times my mother told me it was going to be fine, even when I thought she did not even believe it herself, But just speaking those words of power, those words of affirmation, really in my 12-year-old mind made me think, well, my mother knows more than I do. And if she says it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. She's with me day and night. There was never a day she left the hospital. And if she did, it would only be for a short period of time. So it's a very difficult and challenging process to go through. But I think ultimately being there, fully present with your child, experience whatever is going on with them. There are days when things will not be fine. There are days when things will clearly, maybe they're knocked out by the chemotherapy. Maybe they're in so much pain. I'm not saying, lie to them and say, it's going to be fine when they're feeling pain. When I say my mother told me it's going to be fine, what I mean is even when things looked like they're not going to be fine, her presence, her sitting next to me, holding my hand, reaffirmed me. So those are some of the small things that I think, even as parents, in terms of offering support to their kids, definitely help. And I think I'm an optimist. And I feel like, yes, we've lost so many people to cancer. Cancer is really horrible. But I think there's hope.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's hope. And part of the reason why that support and encouragement is useful is I strongly believe that fighting cancer is not only about the medicine working, it's also about your heart and your spirit and your mind. I think it's actually scientific that people would generally have a positive attitude towards whatever they're going through, tend to go through the tunnel and see the other side. So I think that positive attitude, that resilience, that, today is not great, but we're going to get through this because we can, I think definitely goes a long way. So, and one thing I always like to say is, I had cancer, I conquered, and I believe so many other people will too. So that light, that testimony that I have, I always, whenever I share my story and people are listening, I always say, it may not do miracles, but it is my prayer for you, to whoever is listening, that in this dark time that you're going through, as you're listening to this, may your hope be, may you find your hope, may you find your light and keep going. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. And we are very thankful and grateful that you created this organization, Youth Against Cancer, and being an advocate for better cancer relief in Zimbabwe.
Josie, I think we're going to see the next Secretary of Health of Zimbabwe in the future.
Yes, and the next ambassador.
Ambassador. So Wadzi, thank you so much. And we can't wait to see you here in Virginia next month. So
Thank you
Would you
so
like to
much.
invite everybody for the FACC Couture Carriage, where you are going to be one of the models?
Yes, super exciting. I'm actually really looking forward to it. And as I was saying to Logan before, I really, in my heart, I really get humbled and touched when I see people who may not even have interacted with cancer in any capacity see the reason and the value behind the cause. So I'm really excited to interact with different people, musicians, designers, and everyone is going to be coming. And I think definitely it's a conversation that we need to have. But beyond that, I am really grateful that there's so many people who see the value in this, in contributing, in participating, and joining hands. So thank you. And for you guys for putting it together. Thank you so much.
We are looking forward to seeing you here on October 23.
Thank you. I will be there.
Okay. Thank you, Wadzi, for sharing your time and story here on our radio show On the Air with FACC. See you again next week. To all our followers and listeners and volunteers and everybody who's watching us right now. Bye.